This is When Science Speaks, a new web series profiling innovative and interesting people working in science and technical fields, from academia to industry to the nonprofit world. We explore how to be a powerhouse advocate for science and your research, how to advance your career in meaningful ways that make you happy, and how to push back on the ongoing assault on science and other related issues of interest happening in the world.
Well, hey everyone, it's Mark Bayer, and you are tuned to When Science Speaks. This episode of the show is sponsored by Newsly, an all-in-one audio app for iOS and Android. Newsly picks up the trending articles on the web on the topics you choose and reads them to you in a natural human voice. Newsly makes the entire web listenable, all in one place. Browse articles from your topics and start playing, including podcasts and digital radio. You can download and use Newsly for free at newsly.me, or from the link included in the show notes that are going to accompany this episode, or you can use the promo code SC1SPEAKS and receive a 1-month free premium subscription. Stop scrolling, start listening, Newsly. I am so pleased to welcome Ronan Diego de Oliveira to the show today. Ronan is Mindvalley's most published author. His specialty is designing optimal science-based protocols that create quantum leaps in human health and wellness. Ronan developed a holistic health transformation program called Holobody that has certified more than 900 coaches around the world to help people develop a healthy lifestyle that they actually love more than their previous one, integrating body and mind and redefining a person's relationship with their own body. Ronan is also the author of some of Mindvalley's top-rated programs, such as 10X Fitness and Beyond Fasting, and he's a frequent speaker at international events like TEDx, Mindvalley U, A-Fest, and Life Plugin. Welcome to the show, Ronan. It is fantastic to have you here.
Mark, brother, I'm happy we're having this time to have a conversation. Thank you for having me, man.
Wonderful.
It's a pleasure. It's an honor to be here.
I thank you, and the feeling is mutual. And Ronan, I first encountered you and your great work when I did myself your insightful, effective 10X fitness program that I just mentioned through Mindvalley. And what really impressed me was the science upon which this program is based, and also the way you're able to explain the science with clarity and passion and enthusiasm. It's clear that you are just passionate about teaching. And for our listeners who are often in explaining science, complex topics to others who aren't as familiar, I'd love to start by asking you, in your opinion, what makes a good teacher?
I have examples of what makes a not good teacher to get started. And then maybe we find out what makes a good teacher from there. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. And I graduated in Brazil in one of the best engineering schools in Brazil. And I had this teacher that had his master at NASA. And it seemed like the guy lived in a different world, because he had studied so many advanced things that he had lost his grounding. So he would come to the classroom and he would say things that could just have been in Greek or a different language, because no one would understand the thing. I think he had a lot of expertise. He had a lot of knowledge, but he couldn't meet us where we were. And so this was the guy with biggest potential in the whole university, but that most people sometimes would be like 95% of the people would not pass his semester and need to repeat with another teacher to really learn the discipline and go forward. And that was a tradition. Everybody went through this guy. And that gave me an example of a guy with a lot of knowledge and potential, but couldn't play the role of the teacher. Maybe he didn't even enjoy doing that. He was very much a researcher guy. And I know that for him was something that he needed to do, count the hours. So I think a great teacher can meet people where they're at and slowly bring them at least one level higher. And so that means a lot, demystifying things. That means find language. That means finding metaphors, analogies, and things that bring the whole concept to a level of detail that can be appreciated by someone who's starting on that journey, or whatever level the students are at. And from there, you take them a level higher. You use a metaphor, you use a story, and of course, you oversimplify things. We always miss details when we oversimplify. I think that's what causes the little bit of anxiety on the teacher. I know that this is not accurate. but I need to come up with a story here. But by doing that, you allow people to intake a next layer of detail and then be ready for zooming in their perception into concept and figuring out some maybe technical jargon, so maybe technicalities of that concept that allows them to have a little bit more granular perception over it. But I think the main point of the teacher is meeting the student where the student is at and bringing a level higher.
Yeah, Ronan, the way you describe the anxiety about an example or metaphor or analogy, because it's not exactly what you're talking about, you put your finger on something that really does get to scientists and bothers them oftentimes because they feel that I'll be dumbing down what I'm talking about. But as you point out, it's like a way station. It's like a halfway point before you get into the details. You're zooming in, but you're giving them that frame of reference, which is just a great way of explaining it. You are going to get to the details, but not all at once.
Absolutely. And there's another perspective in this. That is, you're not really dumbing down a concept. Because if you play with that idea and you assume that you don't possess the entirety of the knowledge of the field that you are into, the level that you are speaking at is also a dumbed down level to where you will be 5 years from now if you keep studying the same subject. But right now, it's the best of your abilities. If you're speaking to another person at your level, you speak all the properties of something that you know. But 5 years in the future, you will look back, and if you play with the dumbing down concept, that conversation you have today is a heresy, right? It's no longer acceptable because now you know more. So then that becomes a bottomless hole. The harder it becomes to communicate, and it misses the point. So I think that there is something to be said on the level of details and the technicalities that we bring or that we leave aside in the first moment to onboard somebody on any subject. It's just like you play outside of your field, right? Let's say that we have a cellular biology scientist here that has all the knowledge about that. And then he goes and tries fitness for the first time. And if he goes to the gym for the first time and there's someone talking about rest, pause, and drop sets and all these sort of metabolic pathways to do an exercise. No, what you want is, hey, here's a dumbbell and we do this movement over here. And as you learn that, now you learn exactly how to move your scapula, then how to position your wrist. But there's a gradual process. The personal trainer cannot meet that cellular biology at the personal trainer level. So he's also not dumbing down. It's just meeting the person where they can step into the field.
Yes. And it's a journey, as you're describing. And let's get into a specific example of what you're talking about, because as I mentioned, you and colleagues did what I consider really the best fitness and exercise and overall wellness program that I've encountered in my many years of doing these things. And you spent a considerable amount of time talking about the science behind 10X, which is what I'm talking about, the 10X program that I did with many listeners working in scientific research, whether it's at universities, industry, nonprofits, and in government who are listening. Can you talk a little bit about the science behind 10X? And I'm sure you'll be putting into practice many of the principles that you were just describing.
Absolutely. 10X is what we call a total fitness program. So a lot of the times when people think about fitness, they don't know exactly what they're talking about. What does fitness mean? We know that it's related to going to the gym, maybe related to running or related to lifting weights, but we don't know that fitness actually has different concepts or different pillars within it. We have things like your muscular strength. That's one component of fitness. This is how heavy you can move an object, how much force you can put into an object to move that. Then you have the muscular endurance. That is for how long you can keep doing that. If you can push a car, for example, by yourself, that's a strength. But if you can keep pushing that for 1 minute or for 5 minutes, that's endurance. How long you can exert that force over time. Then you have your body composition. So that means how much muscle mass, how much bone density versus how much fat you carry in your body. So that's a bit of your body composition. Then you have your cardiovascular endurance. That is how long you can keep your heart rate up for when you are running. Maybe you're not doing something that requires strength, like pushing a car, but you're running or you're climbing or you're going upstairs. If you go to climb a hike over a hill, You realize at some point your heart goes up and you need to stop and take a deep breath to rest. If you don't need to stop to take a deep breath to rest, that means that you have a high cardiovascular endurance. You can keep the heart rate up for a longer amount of time. So you see, you have different pillars of fitness. And then what we do in a fitness protocol is that you have one type of sport or routine for each one of them. So for my muscular strength, I will lift heavy weight. I'll do the bench presses, the deadlifts, the squats. For my muscular endurance, I'll work with something like CrossFit or circuit training, conditioning training. I use lower weights, but I do it short rest time. So my muscles are contracting for a long amount of time and they're burning. For cardiovascular endurance, for example, I run. So then I have a calendar here, right? I have my Monday and Tuesday and Thursday training is for strength. My Tuesday and Friday is for endurance. My Wednesday, sometimes on Saturday, is for muscular endurance. And then I need to mix nutrition to change my body composition. It becomes a whole full-time job. So what we were thinking is, can we design a protocol that puts together all the different techniques that develop each one of these pillars within fitness into one routine? Now, what if we studied the scientific principle of what develops muscle strength, muscular endurance, cardiovascular endurance, body composition? What is driving that? And we put these variables together and optimize them for time efficiency. What is the result? So that's what we did. And after the result of that is a routine that you do twice a week as a average minimum for about 15 minutes each time. So instead of having a whole weekly calendar full of 1 hour training, you have one training on Monday, one training on Thursday, 15 minutes each. Use a combination of weightlifting, so strength training that I can use on machines or dumbbells and barbells in a gym, or even with your body weight with some resistance bands. Use some components of the circuit training. So you move from one exercise to the other without rest, and uses a form each repetition that you do for that exercise. If you're doing a squat, for example, you go up and down. You do them in a specific pace, very slowly, that keeps those muscle fibers under tension for a long amount of time. So what we're doing here is that we are inducing that burn in the muscle that also develops not only strength, but also the muscular endurance that allows your muscle to do work for a longer amount of time. So there is a way of putting all these variables together and make them time efficient. But no one else had thought about that. A lot of people think about how they get my strength training routine and optimize that for the maximum amount of result. In other words, I'll look at the strength training athlete at the Olympic Games and I'll see what type of training he does, and I'll try to adapt to my own lifestyle. So I go over the board into this one direction. Nobody's going into all these directions and saying, what would this look like for somebody who's not a professional athlete, who has other things in their lives going on, right? Who don't want to be 5 hours or 6 hours per week in the gym. So we were asking ourselves this question, and the protocol is a result of this combination for time efficiency.
And again, as I mentioned, I did this program. And as you're talking about, Ronan, with the time under tension, that was the biggest aha moment for me. Using this slower tempo, that I could actually get a better workout in a shorter amount of time per workout and do it fewer times per week that I had ever experienced. And it was really just like mind blowing. So I also want to ask you, because as you point out, what is fitness, right? It's not just the weight training. And you talk about nutrition, for example, and sleep as part of this overall fitness message that's within the 10X program. With all this information, it can be difficult to decide what to include and what not to include. You gave the example of a scientist going to the gym, so much that person doesn't know if they've never worked out before. Could you share with listeners a bit about the approach that you use when you're deciding what to include, what to leave out, and also how to express the concepts and elements of the program, whether it's in fitness or sleep or nutrition?
In terms of, so just to see if I captured your question, Mark, it is about when we are designing the program, in terms of nutrition, sleep, and training? What do we include and how we decide what to leave out?
Exactly. It was clear to me as I was doing the program, it's incredibly well thought out with video and all these other elements that make it easy to follow. And I'm sure that required an amazing amount of work and a lot of information. You had to synthesize, some present, but not the same way you learned it as in colleagues with the research. So yes, how did you distill down that information, deciding what to include and what not to include? And I think that would be really helpful for listeners who are often faced with just mountains of complicated information about their research and then told, okay, now you need to explain it in 3 minutes to someone who's never heard about it before.
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean. And my process, my creative process, designing 10X or all the other programs that I have inside or outside Mindvalley, there's a backward planning. So my main point here is that I'm imagining somebody going through a journey. So it is an online course. If it is an online course, my main premise is that somebody will need to be able to take action on something. They will learn how to take action on something. So the whole course is a transformational course. That's how we call it. It's not only a theoretical course that you're learning about a subject, it's guiding you to take action. So my main point here is, if I have 12 weeks with this person, what is the action that they need to take on day 1, day 2, day 3, all the way to day 85, for example? This is my first point. I open a mind map. That's how my brain works a lot. I have an app that you put your thoughts into a mind map disposition display. And I put day 1, day 2, day 3, all the way until the end. And if they are doing a strength training routine, increasing their muscle strength, and muscle endurance, there are a couple of things I know they need to do. That's the technical knowledge of the field, of the strength training. So I know they need to have a certain training routine. They need to repeat that training routine every week, and they need to be able to increase the load that they put for each exercise. They need to be able to make those exercises heavier as they go. If they do that, this is with the whole safety and techniques, right? If given that the technique is well executed, this gives the majority of the benefits of the program. So then I chart their journey and find what they need to do on Monday and Thursday of the week 1, Monday and Thursday of week 2, and how do I ensure that they are doing the exercise, they know the techniques, and they know how to progress on each one of those exercises. So with that, I have a backbone. Now my question is, if this is the action that somebody needs to take, I need 2 things now. One, I need a piece of content that is communicating that action very clearly. Now, I cannot expect somebody learn a theoretical example about strength training and say, hey, on strength training, you need to do a few exercises and you need to know the technique very well and you need to do them heavier. And I can't expect somebody to make the conclusions that, hey, that means that on Monday and Thursday, I need to do this exercise. No, I need to communicate this super clearly, that there's no room for misinterpretation. So there was part of my content there that is explaining, hey, your action today is this. This is exactly the recipe. I'm trying to see how can I make that be as clear as possible. What are the actions that they should take? And what are the actions that they should not, because they are probably mistakes. When you're doing this exercise, this is what you might see, and this is what the way of doing this. This is not the way of doing that. So this communicating, this ensure that they can, to the best of my abilities, follow that plan that I have from day 1 to day 85. Then, besides explaining the daily tasks very clearly, my motivation is to give some knowledge behind that, because it's a program for adults. And it's very different. Now, I worked with pedagogy and andragogy before. Teaching children at school, how we learn at school, is much more like following a set of instructions, right? Hey, this is how you add numbers and this is the homework and let's do this. This is how we calculate this equation here, and people would just execute that when we are kids. When we are adults, there's much more questioning of why should I know this? Why should I do that? And how is this relevant to me? And because that course is for adults, I can't only say, hey, guys, Monday, do A, B, and C in this order, go. We need to have some knowledge that explains why is it that I need to lift weights? Why is it that it needs to be heavy? Why is it that it needs to be slow? Why do I need to make it heavier every time? What happens if I jump the gun and I get too excited and put too much weight and my form breaks down? So that knowledge needs to be absorbed. So it needs to be in form of meeting the student where the student is at, maybe metaphors, maybe analogies, that then create a feeling of empowerment. Hey, I know what I need to do and I know why I need to do those things. Then this is I trying to put as just enough information to cover these two objectives. Declare task as clearly as possible, so no room for doubts there, and explain the reasons behind with the theory around the subject, so they can know why they're doing it in such way and how they can customize this action if need be. So I need to give enough knowledge for that. They need to be at the end of the course that they are learning something to do. I don't want them to depend on the course or to depend on me. And I want them to have certain type of knowledge that they can start making decisions on their own. They feel comfortable because they learn what is behind. Then another thing, that because it is a fitness program, it needs a lot of demonstrations. It needs a lot of video demonstrations. And I think this is where most of the programs from the fitness field lack. Because I work first with clients one-on-one, and I also work with them online. And I have seen different courses from different authors. And the main issue here is when there is a video that gives the clear instruction, that gives the reason behind the instructions. There was one big guy that I worked with before, one of the top one fitness instructors in the world, and he was explaining the idea of training with slow repetitions to the point of muscular failure. And muscular failure means that you are lifting a weight. Imagine that you're lifting something heavy and you're doing squats. You're standing up and you're sitting down, and standing up and you're sitting down. By the fifth or sixth time, start feeling heavier, right? You start feeling a little bit more tired because your legs are running out of fuel. If you keep doing 3 or more repetitions, at some point, it doesn't matter how much you scream, how much you pray, you can't lift it up anymore. That is muscular failure. It doesn't matter, how much your willpower you have, you can't move, you can contract your muscles until you rest for a few minutes. So the guy was explaining that, and he was explaining all the exercise that you need to do. And then he said, hey, here's the demonstration of the exercise. He was doing a very lightweight.
This is When Science Speaks, a new web series profiling innovative and interesting people working in science and technical fields, from academia to industry to the nonprofit world. We explore how to be a powerhouse advocate for science and your research, how to advance your career in meaningful ways that make you happy, and how to push back on the ongoing assault on science and other related issues of interest happening in the world.
Squat, and he was explaining the idea of muscular failure. He says, now your task is to do all these 5-6 exercises until you reach muscular failure. But there is nobody see what that looks like. And so what you see the guy in the camera saying, he's explaining that, he's demonstrating with a very light weight that doesn't show that level of intensity. And he's expecting that people will go and do this in a completely different way than he does. They're going into limit of their abilities. But what they do is the opposite. They try to mimic what the teacher is showing. So they're also training with light weights. They don't know what muscular failure looks like because there's no real demonstration of that. They get no results and they say, hey, I'm following the program and it's not working for me. And so I thought, if it is a fitness program, there needs to be real case scenarios for you to look at. So we need 2 things. One, we need demonstrations of the proper form of each exercise. This is let's say, the pedagogical example, the tutorial that you do with a weight that is light, that you do under controlled circumstances. So you show what a perfect exercise looks like. Then you need the teacher, in this case, doing this exercise or this whole workout to the best of his ability, reaching the point of limit that he's expecting the students to to finish. So I would record myself doing the workouts with the weights that I use it, so people can know what it looks like in real life. I hear what it looks like when I'm demonstrating the technique for you. Very beautiful, very safe, very easy. Now, when I use the weights that for me are my limits, that you use the equivalent ones for you, this is what it looks like in real life. So then you can deconstruct it and somebody has a very clear example of a real application of those things. I think this is what I missed in my mechanical engineering course. There was a lot of, hey, this is what things work in an ideal scenario, but there was never, hey, this is what actually comes to you in a day of work. And this is the type of problems that you need to be faced in a practical situation to solve. So that's what by covering all these things, I said, okay, now we have enough for a program, and everything that went beside those objectives, then they were removed from the content. Everything that was not connected to making sure that the instructions are clear, that people know why they do these things, and they have a demonstration of real life scenario of these being applied, then everything that was beside the point was removed.
You know, I just want to underline a couple of things that you mentioned, Ronan, that I found that were so impactful. One is, as you've been describing, you explain. So at the beginning of the video, you're talking to the camera and you're just explaining, which is helpful. And then you're showing, so you're using a different medium, really. You're actually showing what it looks like. And there are overlays that are graphical overlays that are actually highlighting different parts of the body that are working. So I can see where I should feel this, where I shouldn't feel this. That's typically not part of a workout. That using workout program, using that other medium. And then the last thing I'll just say, which you touched upon, is you actually do the workout as if you were taking the workout, as if you're someone who's watching and doing what you're telling people to do. And I can tell you, as someone who went through the program and stuck with it, I have in my mind, I don't know why it's this particular exercise, but I have in my mind you doing this lateral raise and you getting closer to failure. And the reason why that's important to me is because when I do that exercise, I know when I am getting close to failure because it looks like what I remember seeing you do as you were getting close to failure. So I remember that really clearly. And I feel like that's that sort of structure with these different pieces of content and you going through it and the graphics, which really enabled me to get what I wanted to get out of the program. So thank you for explaining the different ways you also present the content, which is just a big differentiator. And it's something for listeners and for all of us to keep in mind when we're explaining.
Mark, a point here. There are two things that I find very precious. That when I talk to somebody that went through a program that was designed and they say, hey, I still remember this thing, is usually one of these two cases. One of them is the demonstrations. I remember when I was at university, I was volunteering for a leadership organization, and part of our job was to create interviews for other people who wanted to join. So at some point you were working on recruitment and you needed to interview people and evaluate whether or not they would join the team. And I remember I was in this interviewing training, and I participated in this training to be trained myself several times. And the training flow would usually be the same, right? The instructor would tell the importance of doing an interview, everything fine there. Go through the structure of the interview, go through the main pitfalls, go through the main tips, give you all the knowledge, and even show you the whole form of interview. Hey, see this question. Okay. You feel confident because you gather all the knowledge, all the tips, where you can fail. And then the first interview that you perform yourself, it's a disaster. The second is a disaster. The third is still a little bit less worse. And then after the fifth, now you start getting the idea. And then every single training that I attended, the problem was the same. It felt to me that something was missing. And then somebody one day came a few years later and did a training, did the same flow, at the end, they did a simulation. So two people went in front and say, now let's suppose I am the interviewer. You are the interviewee. Let's simulate a couple of pitfalls. Let's simulate a couple of tips here. And there was a little that I remember up until this day, the demonstration. And then after that training, everybody who was attending that, they nailed the first time they needed to deliver the same type of job. So then I realized demonstration has a really high value into conveying a message, into transforming an experience that is now in your mind to somebody else. Much more than just highlighting where you may fall, where the main obstacles can be. Let's demonstrate that thing. Let's simulate that thing. And this we capture because it's a visual storytelling for that. The second thing is the metaphor and analogies. I remember, for example, on a different quest, on a different Mind Valley program that I work with intermittent fasting. There's one of to start the program, I explain what intermittent fasting is, and I create a little analogy. Imagine that you're coming from the grocery shop, you're arriving at home full of bags, and those bags have food. You have three things that you can do with them, right? There's a piece of food that you eat right now, so you leave them on the table. Whatever you're going to eat in the next hour or until the end of the day, you put in the fridge. When the fridge is full, the remaining amount of food you put in the freezer. This is the food that I'm going to eat maybe in 6 months from now. When you finish eating what you have on the plate, later on, start picking food from the fridge. And this is how, when the fridge is empty, you take stuff from the freezer. And your body works more or less in a similar way. When you eat nutrients, part of those nutrients are burned in real time for to become energy. Part of that is stored in your fridge. The fridge of the body is the liver and the muscle fiber. So the nutrients become glycogen. They are stored in the liver and in the muscle fibers, and this is the fridge of the body. So when the muscle fibers and the liver are full, then the remaining amount of nutrients, they are stored in the body's freezer. The body's freezer are fat cells. What happens if you keep doing grocery shop nonstop? If you keep doing grocery shop nonstop, you start getting some stuff out of the fridge, but then you are replenishing already. You never get food out of the freezer. If you keep having meals nonstop, if you never have a time without fasting, similar things happen. You keep using energy from the liver and the muscle fibers, but you keep replenishing them. So you never get to tap into the fat storages, to the fat cells, and burn that fat. And the metaphor goes more or less like that. And every now and then, when I meet somebody in an event, they say, hey, I can now explain what fasting is to my partner or to my kids because I know the little metaphor. The same thing happens on 10X with different parts of the muscular tension or progressive overload and things like that. So I think the metaphors and analogies, whenever you can come up with one that, of course, is an oversimplification of things, but what it does is that allows people to pass the knowledge forward. And so they feel that ownership over that. So if you explain something with a little story that is fair enough to understand at the beginning of that, not only somebody's more confident to take action, but they are so confident to take action that they can even tell this to other people. And when they are telling, hey, this is how fasting works, more or less, now they feel much more confident to implement the system that comes with it, instead of being intimidated by it because they don't know not even how to articulate that for themselves, let alone articulate that for other people.
Yes, picking that right metaphor. And as you use one with intermittent fasting, you're talking about going grocery shopping, putting things away. Everybody has that experience. Adults can instantly imagine that in their minds. And it's really helpful to have that because then it becomes memorable. And then we take action on things that we remember. Just a great specific example, Ronan. Now, I want to ask you about your own personal journey. You speak around the world about the journey that you have made with respect to your own body, mindset, fitness, your holistic approach to health, integrating body and mind. Can you give listeners a sense of your journey so far and also the philosophy that you share in your online programs and in the speeches that you deliver around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. How did the mechanical engineers not passing at fitness? That's the question.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The story here is that was as a kid, I learned, I had a math teacher in my fourth grade when I was 10 years old. And the guy was a monster to all the kids. He was a very fearful teacher. And one day he recognized me in front of the whole room because I got 100% score on the math test. So there was one kid that was being a little bit of a trouble. He was stopped the whole class. Say, guys, you are all causing trouble in the classroom. You think you are owning the world, but who is really owning here is Ronan because he got 100% in his math test. And so I felt, wow, that monster of a teacher is highlighting me. So I felt a sense of protection. And I felt, yeah, I'm doing something really right. I'm proud of myself. So I went home and I showed my mom the math test. And it was my name and 100%. Said, Mom, math test, my name, 100%. Math test, my name. 100%. Yeah. My mom said, you don't do more than your obligation. That was my mom's slogan. Every time I got 100%, like every time I got a perfect score or something at school, she repeated the same sentence. You don't do more than your obligation. And it was not coming from a mean place. My mom had a very rough childhood. It was her way to make sure I had thick skin, that I was not just getting comfortable with everything. But to me as a kid, what I identified and what I learned unconsciously is that if I am not perfect, or being perfect is the least I can do. Not perfect is not even acceptable. So I played all the games that I had. I was a really good student. I was really good, especially for math, science, and physics and chemistry. And I played that game very well. I was good in arts. I was good in playing music. I had a guitar. I had a band. I was really good with that. I played that very well. There was one field that I was not far from being 100%, and that was the physical field. And I was always a very skinny kid, and I was always the skinniest, the shortest, the slowest, the one with the least amount of physical capabilities. And in Brazil, it's a big deal because kids play football. And if you don't play football well, you are ostracized from society. So I got a lot of bullying because of that. There was, kids pushing around, kids they is laughing in the back of my head, laughing, making jokes. As a kid, you don't understand that. And so the feeling that I had was, it's unfair. I was looking at my body and said, oh, I don't like this. I was born in this. I didn't choose this. It's like, why it's so unfair that I get this treatment from all the kids, that I feel bad about myself. I feel weak for something that I can't do anything about it. So I kept that secret desire of one day transforming my body. For all these years, my unconscious belief was that I was a weak boy and I wanted to be a strong man. I had one role model at that time when I was a kid. A strong man was Conan the Barbarian. I don't know if you're familiar with Conan the Barbarian.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. The guy was like, each one of his legs was the size of my whole body at that time. And that was my vision. That was what I thought a strong man would look like. And so I waited until 18 years old that I could start training in the gym. For that, my dad didn't allow me. And from there, I changed my passions. I said, now I'm going to live inside of the gym. I'm going to build my body. I'm going to transform myself in Conan the Barbarian. But it didn't work because I joined with other friends. We were going to the big guys in the gym, to the buff guys. And we had two questions. How do you train? What do you eat? And we would do the same. And it worked for everybody else, but I had a lot of issues with the body. I had chronic constipation, so I couldn't eat the amount of sweet potato that the guys ate. I had bronchitis, so I couldn't take long trainings as they did. I had my heart function was also impaired, so my intensity of training couldn't be as much as theirs. Then their immune system was very weak, so if I trained the amount of training that they did, after maybe a month, I would spend a week in bed because I would fall sick. all the signs led me to believe that really my body, I was a weak boy. I was doomed to be a weak boy forever. But then I remember I was a good student. So I went, say, hey, if I do what everybody else does here and it doesn't work for me, maybe it's not my body. Maybe I'm just not doing something that is specific enough for my physical makeup. So let me go and see scientific studies. So I started studying one from books from literature that you learn from physical education, medicine, physiotherapy, what you studied in university. I was reading those. And then I started going to PubMed and other scientific platforms and just reading, learning how to read studies and how to get data from there and see out. There are two groups of people. These people build muscle mass. This is a protocol. Okay, I'm going to do that. And then I started running experiments. And finally, the body started to transform. And I realized, wow, it was not my body that I was weak. I was just not doing the right strategies. So then at that time, I said, because now I know the answer, watch me become Conan the Barbarian. I was still obsessed with the idea. And so for the following maybe 2.5 to 3 years, I abused it of all the knowledge that I had. And so I was overtraining the body, was training when I was already exhausted. At some point, I couldn't sleep anymore because I had my whole cortisol pattern that was disrupted. I was just pushing, and then I was overeating, like the point that was the main challenge of my day was to eat the amount of food that I needed to eat, so to gain muscle mass, and then was the under eating to be able to create muscle definitions. That went on for years. I was competing as an athlete. I was doing well as an athlete at that time as well. And then other people started to come to me and I started training them. But I realized that one day I got to that kind of Conan the Barbarian shape. And I took a photo shoot and whatnot after those years of pushing my body beyond limits. And then, Mark, what is interesting is that all the problems that I thought, all my life problems that I thought would be solved when I became that big guy, they all remained untouched. Nothing happened with that. I was still the same little boy insecure about my body. And I realized that was not the answer. Building a lot of muscle and that was not the answer for me to feel good as a man, as a human being. And the main thing was to be in a place of respect and honor towards my body. And there is nothing that my body can do from an external point of view to make me feel whole as a human being. So at some point, I needed to shift the narrative and realize that I needed to be able to create this sense of honor and respect towards myself, regardless of my shape, my physical performance or lack thereof, and offer the same sense of honor and respect towards my body and let the body become what it wants to become. Not trying to manipulate the body to be what I want it to be so it can make me feel in a certain way, which will never happen. But show up to the body just like it shows up to me. More or less what we do to our kids, right? Nowadays, more conscious parents, they don't try to manipulate their kids to become an engineer or a doctor. They just create the environment and give all the resources for the kid to find out what they want and how to express their fullest potential. And they show up for the kid. If the kid becomes an engineer, becomes a doctor, becomes an artist, everything is great because they are, as long as they become what they want to become. So to me, the mindset became this towards my body. I will find out what my body needs. I'll try to listen to it. I'll try to protect it from harm. I'll give you all the resources and see what the body wants to become. See what comes with less resistance. See what the body wants to express and feed that direction. The body transforms, you get results, it doesn't, it's completely up to the body. My fulfillment comes in showing up, in taking care and creating the environment for the body to fully express its potential. So this is a bit of the story and how the mindset changed over time.
It's really fascinating, Ron, how you're bringing together your personal experience and applying it in a way that's universal I'm sure listeners can relate to a lot of the feelings that you're describing, and then you're offering a attitude or approach that for me was totally novel. I had no idea, except when you talk about how a parent lays out the conditions for the child to succeed, which is exactly, as it turns out, the approach that I've taken with my kids. And it's the same exact thing I tell them all the time. I want to put you in a position to be successful. You decide what you want to succeed at. You want to be a doctor today, and 2 weeks later, you've got a totally different path. It doesn't matter to me, but I want to put you in a position so that you can find something you're passionate about. And applying that kind of mindset to fitness, really insightful. Thank you for sharing that nugget. And now I want to give you an opportunity and to talk about some of the programs that you are involved in now, the initiatives. We've talked a bunch about 10X because I've done that program, but you have a lot of other programs that are out there that listeners might be very interested in learning more about. Can you share what you're working on these days?
Absolutely. Besides the Mind Valley programs that I have, that can be, most of them can be accessed at any point in time. So if anybody's interested in 10X or beyond fasting, I have another short one called Advanced Home Workouts that I created in times of quarantine, of lockdown, for people to train with things that they have at home. All of them are available to start at any time in the Mind Valley platform. There is a coaching certification course called Whole Body on Holistic Health that happens once in a year. This year's intake started already in August. So next year in August is when it started the next cohort. But right now, the main program for us to work together is a program that I call Beyond the Body. This is my group mentoring and group coaching program. This is when I get a group of people, small group of people, and I coach and mentor them for 3 months on reframing their relationship with their bodies. So this conversation we just had, how do you get into a position that you are providing the circumstances for your body to fully express what is designed, what it wants to become, and what are the actions, how you listen to the body, how do you create a set of routines that allows that to happen. And then we work across 7 main lifestyle needs that are the ones that create the whole baseline of health and fitness. My main point is this: if I plant a seed of a tree, of an apple tree, for me to get apples, I just need to make sure that there is fertile soil, that there is sunlight, and there is water. So these 3 things, they give that seed what it needs, and then nature takes care of the whole transformation. The seed becomes a tree, the tree, bear fruit at the end. I don't need to create the trunk of the tree, to glue the branches, to paint the fruit. I don't need to do any of those things. I need to give what the seed needs. And so my main thought was, if I were to use a similar approach to my body, if I were to give what my body needs to fully express its potential, what is the equivalent of the fertile soil, the sunlight, and the water to the body? And the answer is 7 lifestyle needs. They are nothing rocket science. They are things that everybody knows. So nutrient richness, frequent movement, sound sleep, inner stillness, deep human connections, sync with nature, the environment, and a sense of purpose. And so then the program goes into how we develop a system to create habits, zero resistance habits and behaviors. How do you get those lifestyle needs and you implement them into your life? They become kind of second nature, becomes who you are. Even if you don't want to do them, those habits show up. And so this is the work that we're doing in over the course of 12 weeks, with a few bonus weeks in the middle. And the next cohort starts now in the second week of October. So this is the program that I work personally with a group of people, and it's the one that we have available at the moment that I think is one of the most exciting ones. From there, we go further. Sometimes we organize retreats. Some of these people come and we do some deep work that goes also into consciousness and altered states of mind in relation to their body. A lot of things go after that, but that's the main program that gets people started in this whole realm of something like conscious, complete health and fitness program.
Yes. And we'll have links to the programs that you're mentioning in the show notes that accompany this episode, so listeners can find those by clicking on the links in the show notes. I want to highlight something you mentioned right at the end when you talked about frictionless routines, no resistance routines, and then I'm to become I'm the type of person who does these things. I am a person who does these 7 things or who is mindful. And that really gets to the question of identity and in making people include these kind of healthy habits into their identity. And as a self-professed or self-confessed, I should say, persuasion nerd, I'm always fascinated at what moves people when what I've done research and looked at the research. I haven't done original research on this, but as I've been exposed to research across the spectrum, when somebody incorporates a habit or a belief or a value as part of their own identity, that becomes extremely powerful as far as their following through on those ideas and so forth. So to hear you talk about getting people to the point where this kind of healthy mindset is part of their identity is so exciting. Thank you for mentioning that and for teasing that out. It's really interesting.
Of course.
And what I'd like to do as we wrap up is ask you, many listeners are very pressed for time. We all are stressed and pressed for time and have a lot of different responsibilities. And I know that the programs we've talked about so far are all designed and have that kind of assumption baked in to them that people are busy. They're not going to be a professional athlete, as you're saying, have other things in their life. How can they get the value nonetheless? So my sort of concluding questions relate to some time efficient things that listeners could do that could help them advance. It could be in any dimension that we've discussed, Ronan, or ones that you're thinking about, and tying into that sort of a piece of it, any kind of piece of advice that goes along with that. So maybe the first part of the question is for people who are really squeezed for time, if you have suggestions on simple things that they could do that could have a high impact on their overall fitness and health.
Where I usually go when I get started working with somebody is on how frequently their body is moving, as opposed to how much inactivity you have throughout the day. This seems to be, to me, primary function of the body is to stay in movement. There's a big difference between mammals and animals in a way and plants in that sense. Plants can make their own food because they get the light of the sun. So they don't need to move to fetch their food. They have systems to stay still in inactivity, to thrive in that state. Human beings, other mammals, for that same purpose, we need to go find food. And we need to be able to run away to not to become food in a evolutionary perspective. And so all the functions of our body, they are primed in the function of movement. That's one of the most fundamental things. And so the body, all the other systems of the body are connected, are turned on top of that, on top of the fact that the muscles are contracting and your body is moving. More or less what happens when you turn the car key to turn on the engine. When you turn on the engine, other things happen, right? The dashboard lights on, you can use the AC, you can use the radio, you can put the window down. And when the engine is off, you cannot do those things. The movement of the body plays a similar function. While the muscles are contracting and elongating, then you can use the dashboard, you can use the AC, you can use the radio. Your lungs are functioning better, your brain's functioning better, your heart's functioning better, all the lymphatic system, all the other systems of the body, they turn on. When the body is in inactivity, you can't use those systems as well. So where I usually go first is, can we make our bodies move more frequently? And for people who have other things in life going on, which is the majority of people, there are 2 things that I like to work on. First, let's find ways to make walking a seamless habit in your life. For example, a couple of things that I do is, one, every time I have a call, at least one call a day, that I don't need to use my hands to type, I do this outside. I get my earplugs and I walk. If the meeting is 30 minutes, or I walk for 30 minutes. If it's 1 hour, I walk for 1 hour. It's really good. When I need to learn something, if I'm listening to a book, if I'm listening to a podcast, all the learning type of time of the day, I do this while walking. To me, it comes also to a point that now my most creative work is also doing while I'm moving. And so right now, before our call, I was talking to you, say, hey, I'm finishing some work. I was at the gym, but working from the gym. So my most creative work that I do is from a bicycle, because this is when I increase brain oxygenation. Whenever you're moving a bit more, heart pumps a little more, and that brings more oxygen to the brain. And this is when you get your best ideas. I have one of my engineering teachers that said, whenever you cannot solve a physics problem, go brush your teeth. The main point is that you stand up from the chair, you take a few steps, you move your body. And when you come back, your brain has a little bit more performance. Now, people who walk before they study, they learn 20% faster. There's a study on German vocabulary. Two groups studying German vocabulary. One went for a walk before and they learned 20% faster because you have more oxygen going to your brain. So to me, creating ideas for things that I need to teach, videos and content, solving difficult problems, either happen while I'm walking and I'm recording my voice, or I'm typing. If I need to type on my phone, I do this from a bicycle. Of course, a more advanced, I won't expect somebody to start from this tomorrow, but it's a great thing to scale that up. Then the second thing is that I use a few I call this micro workouts. How does the body know that frequent movement is happening? This is based on the activity of the heart. So what you really want to do is to increase your heart rate a few times frequently throughout the day. So if I'm working on my computer and I'm here for too long, then I have always an alarm clock for at least every 2 hours. And then I do a couple of things. I can do a few body weight squats, a few push-ups. I have a pull-up bar there that I do a few pull-ups. Nothing to get to my muscular failure, nothing to be tired. This takes literally 1 minute to 90 seconds, just so my heart rate gets higher for a few moments. And that covers the objective. Or if I don't want to do push-ups and things like that, you can look into YouTube videos teaching you animal flow basic flows. So these are animal flow or primal movement. These are basically movement flows that you are squatting and then you are in a plank position and then you are kicking your leg. It feels like a little bit of a dance, but you are using the strength of your body. Really good to create core stability. You're not doing this to a exertion level that makes you tired. You're just moving your body a little bit more than the usual. So then your heart rate goes up a little bit. So this is a couple of things to get started with. And besides the realm of moving your body, I think another point that another low hanging fruit is looking at your sleep schedule and creating a evening routine, something that you do every single day before you go to bed, with the objective of making that regular. Going to bed more or less every day at the same time. So for where most people go is that the evening is that time that they accomplish the things that they haven't accomplished throughout the day. And so they go to work until late. Or is the time that they take for themselves. Man, I didn't take any time for myself. I work until late. Now I'm going to scroll here or watch some stuff until late in the weekday. Or watching news at night gets the brain very stimulated, and then it's hard to fall asleep. And then you see that your sleep schedule is erratic. When that happens, the sleep is the time that your brain goes to work. So all the repair, physical and psychological and emotional, everything that all the physical stimulus, the way that is repaired to become stronger on the next day happens during your sleep. All the information that you absorbed, for you to consolidate them into your long-term memory and remember the next day, it happens in your sleep. All the emotional situations the way that you let them go, put them into perspective, and don't carry resentment or anger into the next day happens while you're asleep. So sleep is too short. You are suboptimal all the time. If you start building an evening routine, that can be reading a book and dimming the lights a little bit, using candles at night instead of bright lights, and maybe having a warm tea, something that you do every night that marks the time of the day, that helps you have a regular sleep schedule, has a really huge return on investment.
Ronan, this has been a wonderful conversation on so many different levels. And I know that listeners are going to be able to, both from a mindset dimension and also from a very practical perspective, put into action so many of the things that you talked about. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. You're all over the world. You're in Estonia right now, but you're all over the place adding value and creating these programs that make such a big impact. I really appreciate, and know listeners do too, you sharing those with us here this afternoon.
Mark, it's my pleasure. Thank you for creating the space to have this conversation, to spread these ideas and giving me this space. It's an honor for me, and you've been kind and generous to me since the beginning. Really appreciate you, brother.
Thank you. Same here. And listeners, I appreciate you. I thank you for being here on this episode of When Science Speaks, and I hope you'll be back next time for the next episode of When Science Speaks.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to click subscribe. Check us out on the web at whensciencespeaks.com, and we'll see you next time.